Welcome back. I want to talk a little bit today about tapestry weaving. It's one of the most enjoyable and relaxing ways of getting involved in weaving, and there are a lot of different approaches you can take. This is a piece that's almost finished. It hasn't been taken off of the cardboard loom, and having the ends finished off, but the weaving itself is done, and it was made with just acrylic yarn that you can get for crocheting or knitting afghans. Fairly inexpensive, and the patterns are not extremely difficult to make with this kind of yarn. As you can see, the yarn that is stretched vertically, which is called the warp, is farther apart than the yarn that goes back and forth horizontally, which is called the weft. And when there are more weft rows than there are warp ones per square inch, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4 warp threads, and you have about 2, 4, 6 or 7 mashed weft stitches together. It's called a weft-faced fabric, and most tapestry weaving is weft-faced, and so it's a little bit stretchy, you can see. Weft-based fabric, even if you're just weaving a plain weave, is stretchier this way. In this direction it doesn't really stretch at all. Okay, so this is just with the regular yarn. This is a more even weave, and I wove it in 2 contrasting colors so that you could see how the warp threads, which are the vertical yarn that's under tension because it's stretched, it creates more of like a checkerboard with the weft yarn, and I packed this as tightly as I could, and it still won't squeeze together like the warp or the weft-based fabric, where the weft is just mashed in and you can't actually see the warp thread at all in this, whereas you can in this. Okay, but you don't have to necessarily use yarn at all. You can actually use strips of fabric or combine the fabric. This is strips of denim with some areas of yarn. And this one also includes some textured yarn for the weft in here, and then more strips of the denim in here. So you can create kind of funky modern wall hangings or a variety of other things. This is another example. This is a lot finer thread. This is actually embroidery thread, both for the warp as well as the weft threads, and these are just the little ends that when you're done weaving in one row and you're going to change color, you can pull the end down through, and when you're all finished then you trim these up. But I leave them there until I'm done because I don't want to get mixed up and end up putting more threads through one row. So this just helps me keep track of where I've already gone down through with the thread. So, how to get started? Well, a really inexpensive, easy way is to just get a piece of cardboard, and you can measure in how far you want to start, where you want your warp to be, and then get some scissors and just start cutting. Okay, and I've done the same thing up here. And then you get your just plain acrylic yarn. You can also use wool or cotton or whatever you want. But and we're just going to wrap this around, and that way we'll have plenty of yarn to do whatever kind of fringe we'd like. You just wrap it around and go in each little slot. And you don't want to pull too hard or you'll probably bend your cardboard. You don't have to, you know, make the tension so strong. You're just trying to keep it fairly tight. Okay, once you have the warp stretched out on your little cardboard loom, you can start adding the weft. And I'm going to use a contrasting color so that you can, you know, see better what I'm doing. You can either use a tapestry needle, which is just a blunt needle. It can be made of plastic or metal. You can also make your own little weaving shuttle, and I just made this out of cardboard, and you just thread the end through a little hole that you've made. And if you're just going back and forth and not making any patterns, this is really handy. Okay, I'm going to zoom in so you can see the pattern, how it works. Okay, you go under one and then over wants to stick. Okay, so you go under one, over the next one, under the next one, and then over, and then under, and over, and under, and over, under, over, and so on, all the way across. Okay, so you see the pattern of the yarn now that I have pulled it through. Okay, and I realized that my first shuttle had too flimsy of cardboard, so I made one with a little bit thicker cardboard. Okay, now notice on this end the yarn is over the warp, and so what I want to do is go under this warp since this line went over it. So I'm going to alternate the very same pattern, but just alternate it. So every warp thread that I went under last time, I'm going over this time. And this is a plain weave. It's just back and forth, alternating. And you can double check to make sure that you didn't accidentally skip one, because every thread that was going under is now going over. Okay, so that's, and I've got a lot of yarn here. I need to pull it tight. And this is the next thing that I want to be sure that you understand. You don't want a bunch of loopy excess yarn here, but if you pull it too tight, do you see how this outside warp gets pulled in? And you don't want that either. Okay, you want to keep it snug, but you don't want either side of your warp to be pulled into the others. Otherwise you'll have a weaving that goes like this. And I mean, if that's the effect that you want, that's one thing, but if it's just because of an accidental problem, technical problem with your edges, which are called selvages, then you don't want it to be doing that. Okay, and so then on the next row, you just do the very same thing. And this is true whether you are using yarn or strips of fabric or any other kind of fiber. Okay, so I've got this, it's coming down, getting tight. Push it down and then pull it firm, but not enough to pull this in. Okay, and I'll do this for a few rows and then I'll come back and show you some other things. Alright, so after you have a few rows and you're at the end of your yarn, I'll show you the end of it there, you want to have a way of securing the end so that then you can start working on either adding more of the same color or changing colors. Okay, so I'm at the end of the row here. The yarn is going over this last piece of warp, strand of warp, so I'm going to go back under it like so, and then I'm going to take my tapestry needle, thread it all the way down, and pull it snugly. I don't want to yank it really tight because then I'm going to have the same problem as it's going to pull this in. So like so. All right, and then to start the next color, you get your yarn, and you can go back up through the same and then continue like so. Now the fun thing about tapestry weaving is that you don't have to go all the way across each row, but you can make patterns by limiting the number of rows that you make a certain color. So in this case I'm going to use the outer 3 warp strands as my green area. Just go back and forth until I get to a point where it's hard to use the short yarn, and I'm going to go down through the outside, making sure that I don't pull it too tightly and distort the rise there. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side over here. I'll build that up so that this pattern has a line of green here, a thin line, and then 2 thicker lines of green going up the sides. Okay, now usually when I have completed an area of weaving, I push the weft down to pack it nice and tightly. But the only time that I don't do that is when I'm going to attach another color to it, because when the weft is really packed down tight, it's a little bit harder to work the needle in between each stitch. So I leave it a little bit looser because I can always push it back down later. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to make a kind of diagonal here in the middle, and then just a couple different ways of attaching another color yet to the sides. Okay. All right, so here is the first stitch on this side that is above the row that goes all the way across. All right, so what I'm going to do is bring the needle up through that one, like so. Okay, that's the first stitch that's in this column. Okay, and pull the blue all the way through, but don't, I mean, you want to leave a tail there, otherwise you'll have to thread it through again. Okay, now this row below it has the first stitch going over this warp, so I'm going to go under it, over, under, all the way across. Okay, and be careful not to pull it too tight or you'll rip the tail out. You don't want that. Go ahead and pack this one down and finish the row. Okay, and then this is the first way to attach the thread. And it kind of mimics what I did on this side. Alright, this goes over, but then the first stitch of, let me just make sure, yeah, the first stitch of this column, I'm going to go through, actually it's this one. I'm going to loop in, pull it around like that, okay? And then because I went over this warp thread, I'm going to go back around under it and alternate the way across. Okay, and then instead of going in this next one, I'm just going to go around. And because I'm making a triangular shape that is symmetrical, on each row around I'm going to reduce the number of rows that I use. And then in these blank spaces I'll be using another color. And I'm not packing these stitches down real tightly either, because I'm going to be filling up this space and this space with another color, and if these stitches are really tight it's going to be harder to do that. Okay, so last time I came all the way to this warp thread, so this time I'm only going to come to this one. I pack it down a little bit, but not much. Okay. Okay, now in the row below, I came down to over to this warp thread, so I'm only going to come to this one this time. Go back. And then let's see, this one, I went to this warp thread, so I'm just going to go to the one in front of that. So I'm just going to go to this one because the row below I went to that one. And this is a, this creates a diagonal. Whoop. It's easy to lose track. I went to this warp thread in the row below this one, so I'm only going to go to this one. And let's see, looks like the time before I went to this warp thread, so I'm going to go to this one, which is one farther in. I'm going to do this until it comes to a point.